Do you remember Alexander's? That sign, those doors, the smell of the store the moment you walked in. If you grew up in Queens, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you didn't, by the end of this video, you'll wish you had. Alexander's closed its doors forever in 1992. No warning, no fanfare, just gone. And with it went a piece of Queens that nobody could ever replace. But Alexander's is just one chapter of this story. This is the story of an entire borough, an entire way of life. This is Queens, New York, through time. Close your eyes for a moment. It's 1930. You're standing on Jamaica Avenue. The telephone wires crisscross above you like a web, holding the whole block together. Old cars rumble past. Two men lean against a sedan like they have nowhere better to be. And maybe, on a morning like this, they don't. This is Queens before the highways came, before the airports expanded, before everything changed. A borough of neighborhoods, each one its own country, each block its own world. Astoria, Jackson Heights, Corona, Jamaica, Flushing, St. Albans. Not one place, 100 places, all stitched together under one name. Roosevelt Avenue was the pulse of central Queens. Under the rumble of the elevated train, the J, the E, the F, life moved fast and loud and full. Look at that corner. Toyland, a cigarette shop, a movie marquee glowing in the distance. This was the kind of corner where kids pressed their noses against the toy store window on a Saturday morning, while their mothers ran errands up and down the block. Everybody knew the shop owners. The shop owners knew everybody's names. Down on Jamaica Avenue, the great commercial spine of southeastern Queens, the stores were packed. Spears, department store. Shops with goods piled in the windows. Officers walking the beat, unhurried. This was 1940. The city was moving, but not yet at war. Not yet holding its breath. That would come. On the quieter blocks, away from the avenues, life moved at a different pace. A hand laundry, a tailor and cleaner, a post office substation where neighbors picked up their mail and lingered a little. A baby carriage sits parked outside. A woman moves down the sidewalk, unhurried. These were working blocks, honest blocks. The kind of block where the tailor knew your measurements by heart. Nobody had much, but everybody had enough. Queens Boulevard, even then, one of the great arteries of the borough. A bus stop on a September morning, 1940. Grates in the sidewalk. Young trees just planted. A horse-drawn cart still visible in the distance. Old and new existing side by side. The way they always do in a city growing faster than it can shed its past. You can almost hear it. The bus pulling up. The hiss of the doors. People shuffling on with their bags and their newspapers and their Monday morning faces. Life, in all its ordinary, irreplaceable detail. But Queens was also a borough on the move. In 1939, just 1 year before this photograph was taken, a brand new bridge opened, connecting Queens to the Bronx for the very first time. The Bronx Whitestone Bridge. An engineering marvel. Clean lines, soaring towers, cables like harpstrings stretched across the water. Queens residents came from all over just to see it. April 29, 1940. The approach road, brand new, freshly paved, nearly empty. Be careful, the sign reads. Bicycles prohibited. A lone car moves in the far distance. The lamp posts cast long shadows. Everything is quiet. Everything is new. The world doesn't know yet what the next 5 years will bring. Just 1 year before the 1940s began, Queens hosted the entire world. The 1939 New York World's Fair, right here, in Flushing Meadows. Look at this aerial photograph. The grand pavilions, the lagoons, the sweeping boulevards, and there, rising above it all, the Trilon and Perisphere. A tall spire and a giant white sphere. the symbols of a World's Fair built on one simple promise. The future is coming, and it is going to be magnificent. 55 nations came to Queens that year. 44 million people walked through those gates. They came from everywhere, and they all ended up here, in Queens, on this ground. A vision of the future, built on Queens soil. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. And overnight, everything changed. The men left. The factories shifted. Across Queens, across all of New York, the war effort became the only effort that mattered. Here is a man in a workshop. October 1940. He doesn't know yet what's coming, just doing his work, carefully, methodically. In a year, everything around him will be different. Queens had factories, workshops, warehouses. When America entered the war, every one of them pivoted. Women who had never worked outside the home went to work on factory floors. The borough rolled up its sleeves, and it didn't stop until the war was won. But even in hard times, Queens knew how to live. On summer weekends, families packed onto the trains and headed south, to the Rockaways, to the beach. Look at this coastline from above, the white waves hitting the sand, the pier stretching into the Atlantic. The whole neighborhood of Rockaway stretched out behind it. This was Queens' great escape. When the tenements were too hot, when the avenues were too loud, when the news from overseas was too heavy to carry, you went to the beach. You spread your blanket. You let the ocean drown out everything else. For a few hours, the weight of the world lifted, and Queens breathed. In the neighborhoods of Corona and St. Albans, something extraordinary was quietly happening. The greatest jazz musicians in the world were moving in, not to perform, to live, to raise families, to be neighbors. In 1943, Louis Armstrong settled into a modest brick house on 107th Street in Corona, Queens. He had toured the world, played for kings, and when it was time to come home, he chose Queens. Down in Addisley Park in St. Albans, Count Basie moved in. Then Ella Fitzgerald, Lena Horne, Dizzy Gillespie. On quiet residential streets, with corner stores and stickball games and laundry on the line, some of the greatest artists in American history were living as neighbors, sharing fences, borrowing sugar, and on summer afternoons, a trumpet might drift out of an open window. Not a performance, just a man playing music in his own home. That man was Louis Armstrong, and that neighborhood was Queens. And then there were the stores. Oh, the stores. If you grew up in Queens, these names are not just businesses. They are memories. They are Saturday mornings. They are the smell of new clothes and the sound of your mother's heels on a department store floor. Gertz. B. Gertz and Company. Jamaica Avenue. Founded in 1918 by Benjamin Gertz, a Russian immigrant who started with a simple stationery store and built it into one of the most beloved department stores in all of New York. 9 floors, clothing, furniture, everything you could ever need. Their motto, "Where Long Island shops." Gertz closed in 1981. The building is still there, but Gertz is gone. Another Jamaica Avenue institution, another store where Queens families spent their Saturdays, another name that makes a certain generation go quiet when they hear it. Mays closed in 1989. Gone. And then Alexander's. We started this story with Alexander's and we come back to it now, because Alexander's deserves more than a mention. Alexander's was not just a store. It was a landmark, a meeting place, a rite of passage. Queens Boulevard, Rego Park. That giant rooftop sign you could see from blocks away. George Farkas opened the first Alexander's in the Bronx in 1928 with $7,000 and a dream. By 1959, Alexander's had come to Queens, and Queens claimed it as its own. For 33 years, that store was part of the fabric of this borough. And then, In 1992, it was over. Bankrupt, closed, gone. The building sat empty for years, a ghost on Queens Boulevard. If you walked past it after it closed, you felt it. That particular sadness of a place that used to be full, now empty. Sears. But not everything was lost. While Gertz and Mays and Alexander's and Sears all closed their doors, one old-timer refused to quit. Macy's. That Flushing location started as a Gertz, then became Stearns, then became Macy's. Same building, 3 different names. 6 decades of Queens shopping history under one roof. Still open, still standing, still serving Queens. One of the last of a dying breed. The building is still there. The name has changed 3 times. But Queens is still shopping there. And somehow, that feels like a victory. And then there was Shea, rising out of the same Flushing Meadows ground that hosted the World's Fair. Shea Stadium. Look at this, an architectural model. The dream before it became reality. Willits Point Boulevard, Corona, Flushing. This is Queens daring to dream big again. Shea Stadium, opened in 1964. Home of the New York Mets. Home of the New York Jets. Home of 55,000 screaming Queens fans on a summer night. The Beatles played there in 1965. The crowd was so loud, the band couldn't even hear themselves play. That was Shea. That was Queens. Demolished in 2008. Gone. But never, ever forgotten. And then there were the winters. New York winters were not gentle. Cars buried to their rooftops. Sidewalks invisible under mountains of snow. A lone figure in the distance, hunched against the wind. A Queens winter taught you things. It taught you that your neighbors mattered. Because when you were snowed in, they were the only ones who could reach you. Queens, New York. A borough that carried a war, built a community, filled its streets with jazz, shopped at stores that felt like home, cheered in stadiums that shook the ground. A borough that lost things it loved and kept going anyway. Look one more time at these streets, the cracked sidewalks, the shop signs, the men in their hats, the women with their shopping bags. They didn't know they were living in a moment that would one day be history. They were just living. Queens, New York, through time. A borough that hosted the world, that built bridges and stadiums and filled department stores with dreams. That jazz drifted out of open windows on summer nights. That is still here. Still breathing. Still becoming. We'll be back with more stories. Because America is full of them. And they deserve to be told. Through Time America. Subscribe for more stories from across America.